Something, deliberate practice. Something, tea time.
Today on Tea Time, I'm here to accept and adapt to criticism that has been leveled toward me recently for a variety of different reasons and a couple of different topics that I'd like to talk about. Welcome to Tea Time. But Jack, that's coffee. You're right, it is coffee. I decided to drink coffee instead of tea on Tea Time, but I'm still going to call it Tea Time. The first thing I want to talk about is the most recent episode of The Late Game, which I'll link here, the part where they talk about the I think sort of the core of my higher levels of emotional activation recently have come from people misunderstanding various things, right? Misunderstanding the purpose of the sandbox, what the sandbox is, what happens in the sandbox, how you get in this, all the different things about the sandbox. Because I spent a lot of time creating a video series that would explain all these things in a sort of educational but entertaining way so that the video would reach most people and there would be a general understanding throughout the Starcraft community of what we're trying to accomplish in the sandbox and what the sandbox involves. But I failed. And I think that's probably really the core of why I'm emotionally activated and frustrated. It's not really that people are disagreeing with me. But that a lot of people are misunderstanding what I was trying to communicate. And I see that more as a failure in myself as a communicator than in anybody else. I think most of that sort of onus is on me. And that's kind of why I feel disappointed sort of in myself. It's good because it's an opportunity for me to improve emotional fortitude and dealing with criticism that's not coming from a place of understanding, which is really difficult to deal with, because if you as the critiquer don't understand what I'm trying to do, then there's a lot of miscommunication there, and it makes things difficult. Also, in general, the community has been sort of on my side for the past 18 months or so. But 18 months before that, it's literally like an 18-month cycle, which is interesting. Basically, the first year and a half of me doing anything for Starcraft, I pretty much had nonstop negative criticism from, let's say, 99% of the Starcraft community, which is fine, which is something that I adjusted to and dealt with, and I got really good at it, by the end. And then people started to turn around and say, "Oh, this JaKaTaK guy, he's these fast fact videos. Wow, I learned something I didn't know before. Cool. Oh, this bronze science thing. Oh, that's funny. It's satire. Oh, it's also kind of poking fun at poor mentalities. That's really interesting." And over time, especially through Tutorial Central, people sort of, got to support me, and it was cool. And the community overall supported me. And now we're seeing a sort of turn where old criticisms that were sort of levied, are being brought back. And it sort of brings up all of those negative emotions that I was dealing with at the time while I was getting my start in StarCraft. So dealing with that has sort of caught me off guard, but I'm much better now. The reason why I didn't jump on the late game specifically was because I was at a heightened state of emotional activation at the time, and I wouldn't be able to properly give a good explanation. So that's why Robert Yip, the other founder of TheSandbox, went on instead of me. That being said, I want to talk about my role in the sandbox just to clarify things and hopefully communicate what's going on a little bit better, and even beyond that. So I have never, in the past 3 years or so of like making content full-time for StarCraft, I have never tried to dictate strategy or coach strategy or teach strategy or anything high level, ever. That has never happened. And it's not going to happen either. My whole getting into StarCraft was, there are so many people talking about high-level strategy. Everyone on the forums, and there are casters and analysts and people making videos everywhere. If you want high-level strategical information, guides, strategies, it's all over the place. It's everywhere. So when I was getting into Starcraft, my whole idea was, well, a lot of people are talking about the strategy. That's great. Maybe I can go in and I can be one of the people that talks about mechanics, because a lot of times I was watching a lot of streams where people were coaching, and the coach was sort of teaching strategy to this beginner player, and they were struggling with it, not because they didn't understand what they had to do, but because they needed more specific guidance on the execution of how they're doing it. And that was a cause of frustration for a lot of these students that was being coached by high-level players and people in WCS and GM. There wasn't even WCS when I started. Wait, yes, there was. It wasn't the way it is now. But in any case, the high-level players that were coaching people and analysts and things like that. There were a lot of students. There were a lot of people trying to improve, but getting frustrated because they were getting caught up on the mechanics. And I really, really enjoyed analyzing mechanics and looking for efficiencies and different things like that. And I found that over time, through teaching music to others, teaching music theory to others, sight singing and different things like that, which is where my background is from, teaching people how to play the guitar, how to sing, how to play the piano. I've found that I've developed a skill for sort of discussing and sort of making clear the essence of something, the very basic fundamentals of something that often gets assumed by the higher level coach, right? So my idea with this whole getting into Starcraft thing was to try to provide primer information for low level players, and I'll say low level, as in like not Diamond Plus probably. That's about the area where it starts to be like, by the time you hit Diamond Plus, it's likely you have most of your mechanics in order. That's not necessarily true. You can get into Grandmasters with cannon rushes and have never built a gas unit in your life. But in general, right, about there, let's not get too caught up on the details of things. So to help those people, give those people sort of a primer, so that way when they go into that lesson with the high level coach that's teaching them the strategy, they have the basic fundamental mechanics so they can get the most out of that. So they can act on the tips and the strategies that they're receiving from high level coaches and things like that. That was my goal and remains my goal. That's still kind of my thing. That's what I'm interested in. So the idea that I'm a coach in the sandbox is kind of misleading, and I'm regretting very much so using the word coach. For a while, we avoided that word, and we used the word support team instead of coaching staff. And when we started doing this most recent outburst of PR, the 9 or so videos, the Team Liquid thread, we had a discussion, the whole group of us, and we decided that the word coach would be a more marketable term. It would be a more understandable term, and people would say, oh, coach, I know what that is. So we'd be able to more clearly describe what we're doing by using the word coach or coaching staff rather than by using the phrase support team. Unfortunately, I think this was a mistake. I think support team is much more accurate. We each of us provide support in particular areas where players are looking for improvement. So if a player wants to improve their mechanics at any level, the player and I will sit down and we'll watch a first-person VOD of their play, and we'll go over each mechanical inefficiency. Each thing they could have done with 3 actions that they did with 5 actions. Each thing they could have used a camera location for to get there faster, but drag their screen instead. And things like this don't require me to be a grandmaster player because it's mathematical and logical. It's just very clear. The example that's my favorite example to give is I was coaching, I was giving a mechanics coaching session, right? We're not talking about strategy, to a Masters League player. Zerg, and what they were doing to spread their creep was holding the shift key and putting boxes around all their tumors while scrolling across the screen. And then once they had all their tumors selected, they would click on the spread creep button and then click and then spread creep, click, spread creep, click, right? So there's a whole lot of actions involved in that. You don't have to be a Grandmaster player to realize that that is an inefficient action sequence to accomplish that task. It's much more efficient to look at the screen that you're looking at, hold control, hit click, click one tumor, all the tumors will be selected, and then hold down the spread creep button and just click. So by showing the small inefficiency in that player's particular play, they were able to improve their creep spread drastically and very quickly, and they were able to do it without the need of a Grandmaster coach. It was just me pointing out, hey, you could do this in half as many actions as you're doing it, and that will allow you more time to focus on other things and allow you to spread creep more often and things like that. The idea that someone in my position needs to be at a Grandmaster level is, I think, incorrect. And I'm really open to a discussion about what I particularly just laid out as a mechanics coaching session, which are the sessions that I conduct in the sandbox with players of all levels. Why is it necessary that someone doing that kind of a session would need to be in the Grandmasters League? The other major misconception, the sort of hang up that happened on the late game, was the discussion got framed very quickly in the context of the core hotkey layout, which is something that I've designed with a team of people, Grandmaster players included, and have worked on over the past 3 years. It's been a sort of growing process, and it's really important, I think, to distinguish. First of all, if you join the sandbox, you don't need to learn the core layout. Like, that's not, the core and the sandbox are two different things. Some players, I will help every player that I can with hotkeys. The way that a hotkey training session goes in the sandbox is as follows. We first discuss, usually it'll happen after a mechanical analysis session, because there are sort of areas you can find in mechanical analysis where it's just sort of like, you could be making use of an extra control group here, and it would be easier to multitask the drop and the main engagement as a result. Things like that. Small thing, or especially camera hotkeys, right? Camera hotkeys, location hotkeys come up a lot and save an awful lot of time. They don't contribute to your APM because moving your camera doesn't count as an action, but they do speed up what you can do, and they speed up how many perception action cycles you can get in within a certain amount of time, which has been one of the major metrics that make a difference between a Grandmaster player and a Master League player. And I'll link the source for that below. It's a skillcraft.ca project that sort of outlined that after a lot of analysis. A hotkey improvement session or a hotkey coaching session will basically begin with a discussion about what it is the player is interested in accomplishing long term. It's always a long-term focus. Usually the question I'll ask the player is something like, long term, imagine you have 1,000 fingers and you can do everything perfectly. A year from now, imagine that, and you have 10 control groups. Could you think of something useful for all 10 control groups that you would want to do long term in the future? Legacy of the Void in the future, do you think that you would use 9 at the absolute most? 8? So we get an idea for what that player is looking for, how many control groups they're looking for. And in the same way, we do the same thing with camera location hotkeys, right? There are only 8 camera location hotkeys, and generally speaking, all 8 get incorporated into the layout, just because no matter what layout you're using, it's really, really easy to get 8 camera location keys right on top of your grid, like where all the letters are. Even if you're just using a straight up grid layout, it's super easy to get all of your camera location hotkeys right on that grid, right on top of it by using modifiers, right? And we sort of go through and talk about all the different ways that we can make an improvement to this player's layout, right? So we have the discussion together, the player and I. They tell me what it is that they want, and I help them to design a layout that gives them what they want. Part of that discussion is the core. I will absolutely tell them, obviously, I've been working on this project with like over 100 people, for 3 years. There's a lot of research and development that has gone into it. Pretty much everything that I've ever thought of and that the community at large has ever thought of involving hotkeys is incorporated into the core. All the tricks and all the advantages and all the efficiency is in there. And really the decision comes down. It's a very simple decision. It's an investment in loss. If you make a small change to your layout, you are making a small investment and you'll get a small gain as a result. The time gap between when you have to adjust to that, the adjustment period where you won't play as well for a little while, and then you meet your old level of play, and then you surpass that later on because you've opened up this new utility that you didn't have before, like location hotkeys or another control group that's easily accessible, something like that. And you can make a big investment and get a big gain, and the time gap is larger. So it's all about how big an investment that player wants to make. Now, if I'm talking to someone like TLO, which we have talked on multiple occasions about hotkeys, and a lot of his advice has been incorporated into the core, and vice versa. TLO has his own specific hotkey layout that we sort of worked on together. Rhett as well has Rhett has tilde for attack move. It's really cool. A lot of Rhett's sort of innovations have been incorporated into the core as well, which are really nice. They all happen to be Zergs. I don't know why, but in any case, so it's about how much investment you want to make. TLO can't afford a large gap, of a month or so, where he's relearning all of his hotkeys, because as soon as WCS is over, the qualifiers are right after that. It's nonstop all year. There's no gap in time. There's no time where he can say, oh, you know what? It's okay if I play at 75% of my capacity for the next month, as long as I get back up to 100% by the end of that month. There's no time in his schedule where that happens. So it doesn't make sense for him as an individual to say, I'm going to make a huge investment and get a huge gain out of it. Instead, he makes small investments. He said, I'm going to change this one key, and then when that's perfect and I'm feeling good and I've got that point where I've passed my old mechanical limit and I've pushed that out, I'll make another small adjustment. And he's been doing that over the years. That's his, that's what makes sense for him. And when I have a hotkey analysis or hotkey coaching session with a player, that's what I ask them. It's sort of, how much of an investment do you want to make? And it's all completely up to them. If they want to switch to the core, I'll help them switch to the core. If they want to switch to fleet keys, which is another custom hotkey layout that Snoot uses, very, very efficient, then I'll help them make the switch to that hotkey layout. Or if they just want the camera locations to be closer than they were before, I'll help them with that. It's just me offering up my knowledge about using hotkeys in StarCraft, and them being the expert player, knowing what it is that they want to get out, knowing the extra utility that they want to get out. And that's the kind of discussions that we have. Sometimes it leads to them learning the core. Sometimes it leads to them making a small investment or a medium-sized investment, or making their own sort of special hotkey layout that they've designed for themselves, that they approve of, that they like. But it's not a requirement at any point in time that anyone changes their hotkeys at all in the sandbox. That's just a knowledge base that I have built up that I offer as support to players if that's something that they're interested in. That's really all it is. So those two things that I just described, one, a mechanical analysis session, and two, a hotkey session or a hotkey coaching session, are basically the only two things that I do in the sandbox regarding coaching. I also will sometimes help people tweak their settings or answer questions about settings or very, very specific little oddities within StarCraft that I've sort of gathered by having a lot of attention to detail. And that's just sort of answering questions in chat and different things like that. Like, how do I make sure there's no pixel skipping on my mouse? I will be able to explain to you exactly how to do that. Little things that I've picked up here and there. But aside from that, that's all I do. So the idea that I'm coaching strategy in the sandbox or have ever coached anyone in strategy at all is incorrect. And I just wanted to clarify that. So now you all know, right? The next thing I would like to address is the recent criticism that has been coming up in a couple of different places that my stream or the sandbox and or my YouTube video, just like me in general, that I'm trying to be some kind of a cult leader and I'm creating some sort of a cult of people. And I really do not want to be giving that 5 off. That's totally not my intention. But I can see where someone would take that away. And again, I feel that that is my mistake as a communicator, that I need to make adjustments and improve the way that I'm communicating in order to not give off that vibe, right? Because I want to make my stream and my videos and in general just interactions with me a place where it's encouraged that you rationally disagree and have discussions about the merits of one thing or another. I don't at any point in time want this like cultish feel of like, you must believe and agree with everything that I say or else you are banished from the land and other such things. I've never said that explicitly. But I am, because I'm getting it from different sources, I'm very clearly giving off that kind of a feeling, and it's not my intention at all. And I think that a big source of that is that the stream is kind of a place for entertainment and silliness and exaggerations and things like that, right? So one of the things in the stream, for example, is that I have a bot, right? I have a little bot in there. And when anyone ever mentions League, the bot responds with, "League does not matter." And you can take that literally and say, aha, if you are hanging out in the Twitch chat of JaK's stream and you think League matters, then you don't belong here. Or you know, anything about League is automatically wrong. And it's a little bit of a joke, right? It's a bot, it automatically responds. It's also kind of funny because if people start talking about League of Legends in chat, the bot will also respond, League does not matter. And I think that's kind of funny. But sort of, you know, let's take a step back. League does not matter. The purpose of this little joke is just sort of implant the idea in people's heads in the chat and remind people that ideas ought to be based on their merit. Ideas ought to be able to stand on their own. If you need to say, I'm a grandmaster and this is my idea, and without the I'm a grandmaster part, your idea makes no sense and has no footing, it can't hold its own ground, then it's not a particularly good idea. If your idea, if you're a Bronze League player and you have an idea about something and it's backed with replays and analysis and statistics and data, then I would value that particular idea much more than the I'm a grandmaster and this is my idea, therefore it's right. So the whole League does not matter thing is, a joke, right? It's a funny thing, but there's a little bit of truth in it. I feel like the best jokes always have a little bit of truth in them. And that little bit of truth is in the culture of the stream and the things that I'm doing. I want it to be clear that I want the feeling to be there that anyone from any league or no league is free to speak about their ideas and will be judged on the merit of their ideas, not based on whatever league they're in. And that's something that's really important to me, that I think that a lot of really good ideas get sort of discounted and, thrown aside because of, well, this person is, X years old. or this person is a woman, or this person is in X league. You know, this is a very widespread thing where our idea, you know, or our interpretation of an idea or our judgment of an idea is based on biases because we know something about the person that's saying them. One of the cool things about anonymity in the internet is that if no one mentions what league they're in or what their gender is or what their age is, that they can just say their idea. And it's this very clean palette. We can look at the idea and say, you know, Novastar 2991 had this idea. Let's talk about the idea. And there's no preconception of who Novastar is at all. We can just look at the idea in its sort of purest form, which I think is a really cool thing. And I'm trying to sort of cultivate that idea in my chat, particularly on my stream. Obviously, I'm not here to tell people that that's the way things should be or that's what they should do all the time. But rather, I'm trying to create a space where everyone's opinions are valued equally, and it's about presenting evidence to substantiate your claims and logic and reasoning, and not I am X, therefore I'm right, or TarthJaK did this, therefore it's correct. As good as TarthJaK is, he's not a perfect human. Just because he did something does not necessarily mean that it's correct. It means there's a high probability that it's correct. But I think it's much more interesting to look at the logic of what's going on rather than just sort of appeal to authority or look at the author and say, oh, well, I'm going to attack you as a person rather than attacking your idea. And it's the holes in your argument, which is sort of an old thing, right? Appealing to authority in Starcraft is an old thing. For example, the appeal to authority was made on the late game that a lot of Kespa players that used to play Brood War are still using classic hotkeys in StarCraft 2, which are Brood War hotkeys, P for probe, P for patrol, things like that, which I think is pretty easy to sort of look at and say, there's a lot of inefficiency there. And there's a lot of stress on the way that your hand moves that will lead to injuries, RSI, and different things like that. And this is something not coming from me as a person who developed the hotkey layout, but from Frank, a member of TheSandbox, who is an expert at ergonomics, who has studied and worked at understanding ergonomics for a long time. And that's a really nice input to have, especially in the sandbox, where you can say, I want to sit up straighter. You know, I want to have the best possible posture when I'm playing StarCraft so that I don't experience pain, because no one wants to experience pain. Well, almost no one, right? So it's sort of very simple. It's sort of, Frank is an ergonomics expert. He has a lot of firsthand experience with improving ergonomics, physical therapy, and all of that kind of stuff. So all these Brood War, you know, hotkeys and all these Brood War sort of layouts are the cause of a lot of repeated stress injuries, according to Frank Moss, which is one source. We can open up this discussion and quote more sources of ergonomics, which there are many of them, scholarly articles and all of those types of thing. Or we can say, oh, well, X player is good, X player does this, therefore it's right, which I think is a less interesting conversation to have. And I think it's a less fruitful conversation. I think that it's much more, it's like, just because someone is good at StarCraft doesn't mean they have perfect posture. I think that there's a very clear differentiation. And there are a lot of differentiations like that. So in any case, league does not matter. That is sort of the whole purpose behind that. To dispel the idea of appealing to authority and judging ideas based on who's saying them, rather than just looking at the idea itself. The last piece of criticism that I want to address is the demonization of the ladder, right? I feel that this was a mistake on our part. It was a little bit too inflammatory, a little bit too aggressive. I think it prevented a lot of people from getting to the next step. And I think it was very poor word choice, very poor discourse to however accurate we might believe that it is, a very poor discourse to phrase this in the starting the conversation with the ladder is bad and this is why. Deliberate practice is good and this is why, right? That's not really a particularly constructive way to frame a conversation, because if you start with what you have been doing is bad, which is the tone, right? We're never saying that explicitly. We're trying to say that it's less efficient or less effective than deliberate practice. We're not saying that it's worthless. No, we haven't ever said that. But that feeling, that's that implication, right? That feeling that comes across from our word choice and from the way we've chosen to communicate the ideas of the sandbox, which has caused some problems, right? So basically, we've lost a whole bunch of people who never really got to this is an opportunity to improve part, because they were so turned off about the hating on the ladder, the demonization of ladder as a practice experiment, or a practice, method. What has resulted in this approach from the Sandbox team, from the videos and the stream and different things that we've done, is that people get caught up in this conversation of whether or not ladder is good, or how good or not good ladder is, what ladder is good for. They'll say, oh yeah, well, so-and-so, appealing to authority, strange, so-and-so ladders all the time and they're awesome. Or like innovation has been reported to just ladder like crazy. Or the favorite, all the best players in the world only ladder, which is pretty much non-falsifiable, right? It's really, really difficult to actually present all the evidence of all the training regimens of every of the best players in the world. It's difficult to produce that data. And I think there's a really important element that gets missed a lot of time, which is that Korean coaches on KESPA teams have historically been very secretive about the way that they train their athletes. This has pretty much always been the case, even in Brood War. They'll get a question, and you can look up some interviews. I don't have any on hand they'll ask sort of, okay, well, how do you train, what's your secret, coach? How do you train these players? Why are they so good? And they'll give some sort of answer like, oh, we just make sure that they get to bed on time and they eat all their meals and they are practicing. And that's it, and that's all there is. Because why, if they have an advantage in the way that they train, would they give up that advantage? So based on this criticism that sort of there's too much negativity toward the ladder and it's sort of muddling up our message, what we're trying to bring across, and which is that utilizing deliberate practice is going to help you improve faster. It is useful for a variety of things. And even if you insert 5 hours a week in your 40-hour-a-week training schedule because you're a serious Starcraft player and you want to be awesome, even just 5 hours a week of deliberate practice, you're going to notice some major improvements. For someone like me, I, as a person, am only interested in competing in tournaments and practicing deliberately. The latter does not interest me at all. That might not be you. You might say, I want a deliberate practice for these kind of things, but for the rest, I like to ladder. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that that is totally a problem in the way that we've communicated our message so far. And I'd like to apologize on behalf for myself and on behalf of all of the Sandbox for not choosing our words with more care and not relaying our message in a way that is more clear. So to give a more pro-deliberate practice approach to the Sandbox, I would like to say that deliberate practice is something that's been used by the greatest athletes and musicians and martial artists and conventional sports, soccer, football, all those types of things for decades and decades and decades and decades. It's proven to work in all of these fields. What we are trying to do in the Sandbox is apply all the things that have been learned and tested already in conventional sports and music and these different things, applying those philosophies of learning to StarCraft 2. If that's something that you're interested in to some capacity, you should join us. You should apply and practice deliberately a little bit and see how you like it. Maybe you'll like it a lot and you'll start deliberate practicing more. Maybe you start with only 10% deliberate practice and you move up to 50%. Maybe you decide, I like to ladder 90% and deliberate practice 10%. Whatever that is, the Sandbox is an experiment in the applications of deliberate practice to StarCraft 2. We've already seen a lot of results, especially in promoting Master League players to Grandmaster League players. Especially, more so than anything else, Master League players that have been stuck in Master League for 12, 13, 14 seasons in a row, unable to improve, then applying deliberate practice next season, Grandmaster's promotion. That's not necessarily going to happen to you, but that's the results that we've seen so far. 5 players so far have gone through that experience in the Sandbox. Lastly, I would like to talk about the Proving Grounds. The Proving Grounds is a group that will pretty soon be breaking the 250 player mark. It is only a Skype group. There's no coaching sessions. There's no documents. There's no workshops. Nothing sort of that sort. It's not a we're going to help you become better group. It is a group that allows us to look for the people who are going to sort of best represent the Sandbox ideas. Things like respecting all people in all cultures, not acting like you're better than other people for any reason at all, being able to express your ideas in a non-emotionally activated and clean way, not raging out, not BMing your opponents, committing to deliberate practice, right? The Proving Grounds is a great place to go, get a network of practice partners, and try out deliberate practice and see if you like it. The Sandbox is a group of people who have fully committed to deliberate practice and are mostly deliberate practicing and laddering when they can't find practice partners. That is the Sandbox. That is what the Sandbox is about. And there's nothing wrong at all if you're going to be the occasional deliberate practicer and you're respectful and you do all these sort of things that we're looking for, but you're not fully buying into the whole deliberate practice thing. You just want to do it every once in a while. There's nothing wrong with just staying in the Proving Grounds and using that as a network for practice partners. That's great. But for us to get good data on the effects of deliberate practice in StarCraft, we need to be taking the players that are fully committed to a mostly deliberate practice training regimen. So those are the players we take from the Proving Grounds and move into the Sandbox. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone who has given us criticism and given me criticism specifically. It's something that I very much appreciate, and it is sometimes difficult to hear, but that is just showing sort of a weakness in my own emotional fortitude and my own sort of emotional intelligence that I can work on and then I can improve on as an individual. That is something I'll probably always try to work and improve on. So I really appreciate all the criticism, and I want to make it clear, disagreements are incredibly important to our improvement, to our growth as people and as, players of StarCraft. If everyone around me were to always agree with everything I said, then I would never get any better. I would never learn new things. I would never broaden my horizons. So I really appreciate all the people disagreeing out there. Honestly disagreeing. It doesn't mean it's go out and disagree super hard and it'll be great, but just honest disagreement. I have a disagreement with the way you're approaching this. I think that, you're hating on the ladder too hard, and that's a problem. I think that needs to be addressed. That criticism has been heard, and we'll be adjusting our message accordingly. We really appreciate all the different criticisms, and I personally appreciate all the criticisms, and I want to make it clear that they're always encouraged. Disagreements are always encouraged on my stream, and are always sort of encouraged. Any forum that I'm involved in, any discussion with me, I really appreciate disagreement, and I want that to be clear. I'm not trying to surround myself only with people that agree with me, because I think that creates a bad effect on improvement, and I'm always sort of looking to improve. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. My name is JaKaTaK, and as always, thanks for watching. If you have an idea for a video you would like me to do, please leave it with any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, or anything beginning with letter C in the comment section below, and I'll see you again soon.